Thank God it's Friday. It seems like only a week ago I said that same thing. Anyway, we're picking up. I just want to open up to a colorful page there. Uh, there we go. This is my original old copy of Magic and Theory and Practice that's filled with many notes. Here is I put the various mottos of Aleister Crowley vis-a-vis his initiatory grades. As you can see, I plan ahead when I'm writing. Perdurabo, okay. But anyway, I'm just showing you that because I mentioned yesterday that oh God, this whole thing just fell out. Well, I'll have to tape that back in. Anyway, we were talking about the astral plane, and in appendix number 3 in Magic and Theory and Practice, or in, if you've got the big blue book, the book 4, part 3, notes on the nature of the astral plane. And we got a few pages into it, and I'll pick up where I left off yesterday. And Crowley will begin to talk about the fact that each material object has its astral reality. In the same, the example Crowley uses is that each of us have a body. But there's a greater reality behind our body, and one of those realities is our character. And our character is something that is invisible, but it's real. As a matter of fact, it's more real than our body as far as accurately representing who and what we are. But about the same time as I bought this Magic and Theory and Practice back in 1971 or 70, I forget when, in Hollywood. I was attending Strasberg acting school at the time, so I was down the street at Gilbert's bookstore on Hollywood Boulevard where I bought it. Anyway, I also got this little tiny book called The Astral World by Swami Panchadasi. And come to find out, many, many years later, that Swami Panchadasi was William Watker Atkinson, who also wrote under the pen name of Yogi Ramacharaka and Theron Q. Dumont, and a few other things. But Yogi Ramacharaka was we worshipped Yogi Ramacharaka's lessons on Oriental occultism, way back in 1967 when we were first married. But I'm digressing here. The idea is many, many years later, though good folks at Weiser Publishing, Weiser Books, wanted to print a series of Weiser magical antiquarian book series of books that were just, obviously still in public domain, but books that had an effect on my life. And this Astral Plane book was one of those books. So I was the curator of that book series for Weiser, and I wrote little short introductions to each of those works, and why they were important to me and such. But William Walker Swami Panchadasi wrote in chapter 9 of this The Astral World, almost a pamphlet that he wrote, something that stuck in my mind as I was reviewing Crowley's words here this morning. I thought I'd also share it with you because it dovetails nicely into what Crowley is about to say. So it's very short, so don't worry. Chapter 9, Higher Planes and Beyond. Raising our vibrations a little, he's talking about in meditation, you rise through the different planes, like rising your consciousness up the tree of life and things like that. Raising our vibrations a little, we now enter upon the great second subplane of the astral, with its 7 subdivisions and its many minor divisions and regions. Almost before I tell you, you will feel the religious atmosphere pervading this region. For this is the plane upon which the religious aspirations and emotions find full power of expression. On this subplane there are many souls who've spent some time on the other subplanes of the astral, doing their work here and then passing on to these scenes in order to manifest this part of their natures. But I wish to call your attention to the occult distinction between spirituality and religion. Spirituality is the recognition of the divine spark within the soul and the unfoldment of the same into consciousness, while religion, in the occult sense, consists of observance of certain forms of worship, rites, ceremonies, etc., holding to a certain form of theology, and the manifestation of what may be called the religious emotions. The religious instinct is deeply implanted in the hearts of men, and may be called the stepping stone toward true spirituality, but it is not spirituality itself. In its higher forms, it is a beautiful thing, but in its lower ones, it leads to narrowness and bigotry. But it is a necessary step on the path, and all must mount it in order to reach higher things. This second subplane of the astral is filled with a multitude of souls, each of whom is endeavoring to manifest and express his own particular shade of religious conception. It may be said to contain all the heavens that ever have been dreamed of in theology and taught of in churches, each filled with devotees of the various creeds. Each of the great religions has its own particular region in which its disciples gather, worship, and rejoice. In each region, the religious souls finds, quote, just what he had expected and hoped to find on the other shore. Some remain content in their own place, while others, growing dissatisfied, drift toward some sub-region or group which comes nearer to their newly awakened conception of truth. In passing rapidly through these regions, you will find that each has its own particular environment in exact accordance with the beliefs of the persons inhabiting it. Some have the appearance of a plain old-fashioned meeting house on an immense scale, while others resemble a gigantic cathedral filled with gorgeous decorations and paraphernalia, and each echoing with the sound of glorious litanies and other ritualistic forms of worship. Each has its officiating priests or preachers according to its regulations. You see at a glance that this environment, scenery, buildings, decorations, etc., are built up from the astral substance by the imaginative power of the minds of those congregating at each point. At the stage setting all the stage settings and properties are found fully in evidence. I say this in all seriousness, and with no attempt to be frivolous or flippant. You may even see the golden crowns and harps and stiff halos in some cases, and hear the sound of eternal chant of praise. I regret, this is my favorite part, I regret to be compelled to call your attention to the regions of some lower forms of religion in which there is a background picture of a burning hell, at which the devotees gaze with satisfaction, feeling the joy of heaven intensified by the sight of the suffering souls in hell. It is a satisfaction to tell you that the suffering souls and their hell are but fictitious things created by the imagination from the astral substance, a mere stage setting, as it were. Dante's Inferno has its adequate counterparts on the astral plane. I ask you particularly to gaze upon this most horrible scene before us. A large, severely furnished edifice is shown, with a seated congregation wearing stern, hard, cruel faces. As they gaze toward the top of the smoking, bottomless pit, from which rises a sort of great, endless chain, each link having a huge, sharp hook upon which is impaled a doomed soul. This soul is supposed to rise to the top of the pit once in 1,000 years. And as each appears, it is heard to cry in mournful accents, "How long? How long?" To this agonized question, a deep, stern voice is heard replying, "Forever, forever." Hey, when I watch evangelicals on TV, I can see them sitting in that crowd. But I digress. I'm glad to tell you that this congregation is dwindling. Well, this was 150 years ago. It might be getting bigger and may be evolving to higher conceptions, etc., etc. Okay, I just wanted to share that Friday morning hellish bonbon. Here's where we left off yesterday. Maybe I need some coffee after that trip to hell. How do I drink it? Black. I picked up at point 12, and there's subsections. A. Every object soever may be considered as possessed of an astral shape, sensible to our subtle perceptions. This astral shape is to its material basis as our human character is to our physical appearance. We may imagine this astral shape. Example, we may see a jar of opium as a soft, seductive woman with a cruel smile, just as we see in the face of a cunning and dishonest man the features of some animal, such as a fox. B. We may select any particular property of any object and give it an astral shape. Thus, we may take the tricky perils of a mountain and personify them as trolls, or the destructive energies of the simoon as jinn. That's a desert wind, simoon. C. We may analyze any of these symbols, obtaining a finer form. Thus, the spirit contains an angel, and the angel an archangel, etc. D. We may synthesize any set of symbols, obtaining a more general form. Thus, we may group various types of earth spirits as gnomes. E. All these may be attributed to the tree of life and dealt with accordingly. F. The magician may prepare a sensible body for any of these symbols and evoke them by the proper rites. Note 13. And this is very important. If you want to turn it up now, or if you want to mark this, this is worth writing down. The, quote, reality, unquote, or the, quote, objectivity, unquote, of these symbols is not pertinent to the discussion. The idea of x to the fourth power and the square root of -1 have proved useful to the progress of mathematical advance toward truth. It is no odds whether a fourth dimension exists or whether the square root of -1 has meaning in the sense that the square root of 4 has. The number of units in the side of the square of 4 has the number of units in the side of a square of 4 units. The astral plane, real or imaginary, is a danger to anybody who takes without a grain of salt contained in the wisdom of the above point of view. Who violates its laws, either willfully or carelessly, ignorantly or by presuming that their psychological character differentiates them from physical laws in the narrower sense, or who abdicates his autonomy on the grounds that the subtler nature of astral phenomena guarantees their authority and integrity. Do you get that? It's impressive to make contact with spirits when you're asking questions, directions, answers to divinatory questions. It's impressive to have oracular spirits appear to you in visions, sometimes in the forms of dead relatives or something like that. It's impressive. It looks good in your diary. It's awesome. But just because a guy is dead doesn't mean that they're any smarter than they were when they were alive. And just because a spirit says something to you, you don't immediately jump to the fact that, oh my God, this three-headed toad told me something, and he must be right because he's a three-headed toad and he appeared in my son's bedroom. Just because they're spirits don't mean that they know everything. In fact, just because an astral form appears to you in any way, shape, or form doesn't mean that the information that they may try to impart has any meaning at all. It's like when people experiment unwisely, you can really use a Ouija board truly as it can work as a wonderful tool. But experimentally, during sleepovers or pajama parties, you pull out the Ouija board, and if there's anything in the room, we're just going to throw the door open, and you can just come in and just tell us what it's like in the dead world. And you know, in magic, you enter other planes of consciousness, but you do it through the most particular and narrowest passage. You don't go throwing the barn door open. See if there's anything floating around here, just jump in me. Okay? I got a body, you don't, but you can have mine for a while. But anyway, and you get answers like, oh, who are you? Cleopatra. Oh my God, it's Cleopatra. Cleopatra's talking to us. Do you have anything to say to us? Yes, very important. What? Chocolate. Cake? What? Chocolate. Cake? Chocolate cake? Chocolate. Okay, just because they're out there, just because they appear, doesn't necessarily mean their manifestation is important to you, not necessarily. And Crowley is saying, look, if you assign an undue amount of objectivity to this phenomena, you're really in danger of just going down a rabbit hole. Okay. 14. The variety, that was a digression, wasn't it? I went to the astral world of slumber party there. I'm sorry. I did see spirits leaping around in little baby dolls and eating. Talking about boys. The variety of the general character of the planes of being is infinitely large. But there are several main types of symbolism corresponding to the forms of plastic presentation established by the minds of mankind, just like Swami Panchadasi was saying. Each such plane has its special appearances, inhabitants, and laws, special cases of the general proposition. Notable among these are the Egyptian plane, which conforms with the idea and methods of magic once in vogue in the Nile Valley. There's the Celtic plane, close akin to the fairyland, with a pagan pantheon. Its keynote, sometimes concealed by Christian nomenclature. The alchemical plane, where the great work is often presented under the form of symbolically constructed landscapes, occupied by quasi-heraldic animals and human types hieroglyphically distinguished, who carry on the mysterious operations of the Hermetic art. There are also planes of parable, of fable, and of folklore. In short, every country, creed, and literature has given its characteristic mode of presentation to some plane or another. And if you can imagine, 400 years of tight Masonic floor work taking place in temple atmosphere, you can see how egregores are built up. The egregores are on the astral plane and not the brick and mortar building. But there are planes proper to every clairvoyant who explores the astral light without prejudice. In such cases, things assume the form of his own mind and his own perception. His perception will be clear in proportion to his personal purity. On the higher planes, the diversity of form due to grossness tends to disappear. Thus, the astral vision of Isis is utterly unlike that of Kali. The one is of motherhood and wisdom, ineffably candid, clear, and loving. The other of murder and madness, blood-intoxicated, lust-befogged, and cruel. The soul link is the woman symbol. But whoso makes samadhi on Kali obtains the self-same illumination as if it had been on Isis. For in both cases he attains identity with the quintessence of the woman idea, untrammeled by the qualities with which the dwellers by the Nile and the Ganges respectively distinguish it. Thus, in low grades of initiation, dogmatic quarrels are inflamed by astral experience, as when St. John distinguishes between the whore of Babylon and the woman clothed with the sun, between the lamb that was slain and the beast 666, whose deadly wound was healed. Nor understands that Satan, the old serpent, in the abyss, the lake of fire and sulfur, is the Son Father, the vibration of life, Lord of the infinite space that flames with his consuming energy, and is also that throned light whose spirit is suffused throughout the city of jewels. Each plane is the veil of the one above it. The original individual ideas diversified as they express their elements. Two men with almost identical ideas on a subject would write two totally different treatises on the same. 15. The general control of the astral plane, the ability to find one's way about it, to penetrate such sanctuaries as are guarded from the profane, to make such relations with its inhabitants as may avail to acquire knowledge and power or to command service, all this is a question of the general magical attainment of the student. He must be absolutely at ease in his body of light and have made it invulnerable. He must be adept in assuming all God forms, in using all weapons, sigils, gestures, words, and signs. He must be familiar with the names and numbers pertinent to the work at hand. He must be alert, sensitive, and ready to exert his authority, yet courteous, gracious, patient, and sympathetic. And this is where we will leave it today, Tomorrow we'll pick up on number 16, which starts off, there are two opposite methods of exploring the astral plane. So part of Saturday morning cartoons will be to look at these two opposite methods of exploring the astral plane. And now I see that I took up too much time with the slumber party. Anyway, have a great Friday. Take off work early and get ready for a wonderful weekend. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.